It's the Fulhamish podcast, your independent voice of Fulham FC. My name's Sammy James. Welcome to the show. Today, it's another Thursday club as we discuss Fulham making no more signings. It might be a bit of a long show today. At least it's a Thursday. We're not gaslighting you last week by releasing the Thursday club on a Wednesday. I'm joined by Jack Collins. Hello.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
Good, thank you.
Good.
You walked in today and you look about 10 years younger. I think you've just had a shave, but I feel like I was transported back to like 2017 when we first met. Is that maybe something about like the quite nice linen shirt that you've got on as well?
I just thought it was warm today, so I was like, what can I wear? And I wore all my shorts that I like at the weekend, so they're in the wash. I was like, oh. And I had some linen trousers. I was like, I chucked them on. I tried to put a t-shirt on with them and it didn't really work as a look, so I was like, oh God, we're going to have to change. So I just threw a shirt on and then I walked outside and it was raining, so I was like, oh, you know what? We're going to have to stick with it now. But thank you, I appreciate it.
No, it's all right. And I've just decided to just not bother shaving and grow a beard, so we're kind of going opposite
directions.
Ends of the spectrum.
You need a skincare routine, mate. You're at that age. We're at that age.
Well, yeah, I've hit my 30s now. I spend my days off doing DIY and boring stuff like that. It used to be like, oh, what pub shall I go to today on my day off? Yesterday I had a day off and it was like, oh, the back fascia needs painting.
Well, there you go, mate.
Yeah.
These are the travails. I went on a stag do, so you know I'm still actually going in the opposite direction.
Oh, okay. Well, at least you're doing all right. Jack, it's going to be a bit of a weird show today. I was hoping that, we did the Thursday club last week. Fulham hadn't made any signings. I was like, okay, but yeah, by next week, I feel like we'll have one to discuss. Fulham and Liverpool, the only clubs not to make a major signing this summer.
Their squad's a little bit bigger than ours.
Yeah, I'm a little less worried about how Liverpool will get on. At what point in my opening question do we press some sort of panic button? I don't feel like it's yet, but I'm also like, come on, guys, do something.
I'm quite close. And I obviously think that you have to be relatively sensible about obviously looking for targets. Clubs aren't always going to want to sell. You're looking at players who are wanted, and that's probably a good thing in terms of we're not trying to sign cast-offs from other clubs here. We're looking at players who feel like more important parts of their own sides. So there does come a slight difference in what that is. But equally, last year at the end of July, we had Marco Silva basically being like, I needed players 4 weeks ago. Not now, and I haven't had enough time. These are the players I needed, and the lessons just don't feel like they're being learned. Now, I understand that it's not as easy as snapping your fingers and a player comes through if you pay the correct money. But if the reports are to be believed, about the Andre deal, for example, that Fulham are deciding whether they're going to go back in with a bid. There's a player that Fulham have reportedly had terms agreed with since January. Right, who we were waiting on kind of, okay, if Pereira goes, then this is going to be the player that we bring in, we think is, a star, and we think is someone that is going to move forward. Now, you can think about what that you like, and also the fact that Fulham seem to be the only club who remain in this race probably speaks to something, maybe slightly different. Maybe the other sides weren't completely convinced. Maybe it's a slightly more of a gamble than perhaps was being made out to be. And the fact that maybe Fluminense were hoping for a bidding war that hasn't really arrived means that Fulham can wait and try and bring that price down. Equally, you kind of want players, especially if they're moving continents, not just countries here, like full continents, completely changed atmosphere. And yes, there's loose phones in this side, but you still want them to have that period of settling down and making them feel at home. And all of that, I think, is important at this point. And all of it feels like the lessons that we've kind of seen and the things that Marco Silva complained about last year seem to have been being ignored once again. And I think that's why I'm starting to get onto a level of being like, there needs to be players through the door. And I think that, what's the point in having pre-season friendlies if you're not going to be trying to bed players in? What are you gaining? Obviously fitness. I'm not completely writing them off, but if you're going to sign all these players after the season has started anyway, then what are you trying to achieve by bedding a squad together that isn't going to be the finalised squad?
Yeah, I mean, we have 3 pre-season friendlies, don't we? We've got Manchester United away, Leicester at home, and then Ipswich away. So we've got 3 pre-season friendlies. So I'm not sure what you're worried about.
Rui Font's big return to Portman Road. That's what we're all looking for.
Andre is playing tonight as we record for Fluminense against Palmeiras, and it's been widely touted that it'll be his final game and that he wanted a bit of a farewell game, which is completely fair enough. So I guess, well, by the time that you're listening to this, it'll be interesting to see how he's reacted at the end of the game. Is there a big, farewell to the fans? Because I think that would be a big clue that he is leaving. But of course, I still worry this Andre deal. Like, I have no doubt he's going to be leaving Fluminense. It's just, is he coming to Fulham?
Well, we do appear to be the only party that remains interested. I haven't seen any real reports that anyone else has dived back into this conversation. So we seem to be in pole position still. I mean, obviously things can change, but that does seem to be kind of the case as we're speaking. Interestingly, Richard Rios, who we spoke about last week, plays for Palmeiras. So we could be watching, two players that Fulham are linked with tonight playing against each other in the midfield, which would be interesting in a slightly different way. But I agree. I think in terms of what this game looks like and what his behaviour looks like afterwards, I mean, I don't know how many people are going to stay up till 3:30 in the morning to keep an eye on what Andre's post-game reaction is looking like. But
a very, very devoted Fulham fan.
I've heard worse ideas. I've done weirder things. I stayed up till 2:30 last night to watch Celtic against Man City. So, I might try my best to get involved with that one. But I think when you kind of look at what he's meant and what he's represented, and I think in some ways, I really like Andre. I think he's a good player. I know that a lot of people who watch more South American football than I do, the likes of Nathan Joyce, who runs the Copper Club, the likes of Tim Vickery, all spoken in pretty glowing terms about him. Nathan in particular is absolutely convinced that he is the man and that he's going to be Brazil's number 6 and that he's going to be that guy that works it out and goes on to become a real superstar in his own right. And I trust his opinion on things. So all of that bodes well, but I'm just wary that in some ways people are expecting there to be a Palhinha replacement when I think actually maybe you have to do that in the aggregate.
Yeah. We'll come on to some more transfer links in a moment because I want to kind of dive through a little bit of the news of the week first. One big kind of bit of news is about a squad number, which normally aren't released until about the day before the season, but Fulham kind of went, big on a certain player's number reveal, RM9.
R9. Just R9.
Well, he's calling himself RM9. Maybe it's different.
That's just respect. He's just got respect for senior. I get it.
RM9 is now a thing. He was obviously 19 last season. Rodrigo Muniz. How much can we read into this? Because on one hand, being given the 9, that was Mitro's number as well. Like, I mean, 9's an important number, whatever club it is. But like, it's quite a statement to go, okay, here's the number 9 shirt. It gives us an indication that we are going into this Premier League season as it stands with Rodrigo as our number 1 striker. And I wouldn't be surprised if Fulham bring in a striker this summer, but it kind of seems to me that if we are to bring one in, it will be, well, certainly competition for Rodrigo, but probably second fiddle, and that he is now our kind of go-to for this season. I mean, we all said towards the end of last season he did enough over those games to prove that he is worthy of starting in August, but it's a big call from the club, and it was big, it was obviously a calculated decision to go quite so big over the kind of promotion of him getting this number. Once
you basically come to the conclusion that he has to start at the start of next season, it doesn't make any sense not to give him the 9. Because
you could have just kept him with 19, though.
I don't think so. I think actually once you're doing that, we spoke about Rodrigo's confidence, and we spoke about, the faith that he felt was being shown in him and therefore the reward for it. So why not go one further? Why not give him the shirt and be like, here we go, we believe in you? Because especially with no one, there to take. I mean, look, Raul could have swapped numbers, I suppose, but I think there's something quite special about the Raul 7 anyway. So that's fine. Raul looks like he's hanging around. So you've got 2 strikers there who Marco obviously has a thing with. And I think it's interesting the kind of strikers that Fulham have been linked with. There's obviously the 2 lads from Besiktas who Fulham have been linked with, an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old. And I think that probably tells you what Fulham are looking at. I think it's Kilchsoy is the main one who Fulham and Aston Villa were both interested in. I don't know if we're going to be priced out of that. I don't know what that kind of looks like, but obviously he hit the ground running when he started at Besiktas. I've only read his name, not heard it pronounced yet, so I'm not 100% sure I'm doing that justice. But I think just the mould of striker that we're looking at there, youngsters with high potential, but maybe not coming in to be first choice striker straight away, suggests that Fulham are, or Marco Silva is, or both parts of the recruitment process are happy with what they've got. And I think in some ways Fulham are a bit damned if they do, damned if they don't here. Because if Fulham had spent 40 million on Vangelis Pavlidis or
he's gone, isn't he?
He's gone
Your
to Benfica,
favourite.
yeah, he has. Watch him score 30 goals in Liga NOS this year, but we'll see what we say.
I noticed that as soon as that one happened, I thought,
I hate Benfica as well. So
part of Jack is sad.
Part of Jack is very sad.
He begged Fulham to sign Pavlidis for about 5 years.
It's one of those weird ones though, because like if a player comes and you have like that much of it, if it doesn't go well, it's like, well, what was that opinion worth? Now we'll never know, so it's absolutely fine. But you look at kind of what you could have spent, like Santi Jimenez, let's say 50, 60 million. Like I think Fulham could have been involved in those conversations, especially given that Mitro money and the Palhinha money. But if that had happened, then you would have had to start whoever you brought in for that kind of fee, right? There's no question about it. If you bring in a £40 million, £50 million striker, you have to start with them.
Santi Jimenez is not going to be very happy, is he?
You can't sign Santi Jimenez and then just start him on the bench behind Muniz. It just doesn't work like that.
When we did that to Breuer.
Yes, but I was alone. Yeah, etc. But like you kind of look at it and think, well, at that point, as soon as something went wrong with that deal, people will be absolutely screaming and rightly so in some ways, for Muniz to start instead. So you have to give him this season. Now, whether you think that's the right move or not, that there's too much weight to the argument that he should start to kind of do anything else at this point. So the question then becomes, well, how long do you give him if it doesn't work at the start of this season? I think he'll be fine for what it's worth. I think he'll score 14, 15 goals this season. I think we'll be all right. But
if we get 15 goals, I'm absolutely over the moon.
Yeah, 100%. But I think that it's going to be interesting to see how he reacts to that, difference of last year. It kind of came out of the blue and he was like, we're here, I'm doing well, this is running, I'm going, it keeps moving. And even when he wasn't scoring necessarily towards the end of the season, he was playing well.
Yeah.
I wonder what it looks like when he starts this season, if at one point he goes through a dry spell, how that confidence is affected. And that's going to be one to keep an eye on. But I think just by weight of logic and what he did towards the end of last season, it would have made no sense not to make him the starting striker and to go and splash that money right now, unless you sold him. Yeah. Again, that's another debate. And so therefore giving him the 9 shirt feels like kind of a logical step.
Yeah. I think that Fulham, it was the transfer team, the finance team, everyone must have looked at what happened with Muniz and his upturn in form and gone, wow, that's just saved us £40 million.
Yeah.
Because it was one of those runs of form where I think we were on a temporary strategy because we lost Mitro late and we didn't bring in a striker, and no one thought Muniz had any potential to do what he did. And everyone thought that this summer was going to be about, okay, which big striker to Fulham sign? We'd have been in that kind of race of clubs that are all desperate for the striker, and that's what the whole summer would have been about. I think the Muniz signing meant that actually, no, you can probably bank that Mitro money and spend that elsewhere.
Well, I think now the kind of space in the squads that you need to fill, right, changes. So where your priorities are, if Fulham hadn't found a Muniz last season, there's absolutely no doubt that the priorities now would be centre forward, centre midfield, right?
What are the priorities now? Because if we're going through the squad, what positions really like up in terms of maybe like probably, green, yellow, red, in terms of red being like absolutely, if we don't find someone before Manchester United, we're screwed, and green being like we could probably not sign anyone at all and we'd be fine.
Well, I think green is going to be now a striker position. Like Fulham might sign someone, but they're not going to go wild.
Especially when you consider Jay. And I know he doesn't.
And also we'll talk about Jay, but he might not be here. But equally, I think that with those two and potential Stansfield there, I think you're looking at an orange on left wing. In fact, maybe red.
I'm thinking red for left wing.
I think the red spots now are that left-hand side, that left wing. I think you're probably okay on the right with Harry and Adama. But I'm still a little bit concerned that might be tad light, especially if Adama has injury issues like he did last year. There's 2 centre midfield red spots as far as I'm concerned. I still think we need 2 desperately. And
even with Reed, Lukic and Kearney, who can all play.
Yeah. I think you start. If Fulham played the season with Reed, Lukic, Kearney, and one more.
I don't think you can say that's 2 reds. I think you could be like. I think you could be like it's 1 red and 1 orange. Surely.
Fine, but I think if we we sign 1 player there, not 2, we get relegated.
I think we're very thin, but I don't think it's relegated if we don't sign 2 centre midfielders.
Well, who steps in? Like, if 2 of those players get injured?
Well, you could probably... I mean, yes.
Harrison
Reed
even
and Tom
your
Kent.
Tyrese Francois have gone. You know, there's nothing there. There's no depth whatsoever. We play with 3 midfielders. Like, obviously Andreas is still at the club and effectively could drop back in, but like, you really don't want to be doing that. You really need to have bodies in that space.
But do you need 2 starting midfielders, or do you need one, like an Andre who will come in and be a starter? Well, let's hope he arrives. And then one maybe kind of like squadish challenging player, or do you want 2 starting?
I think you need 2 starters to replace Joao Paulinho. Like, on his own.
And what? And so then Reed, Lukic, bench or sold?
I think that they stick around. I think Kenny becomes the backup 10, and then you have a triangle. We would say Silva has 2 players in each position, right?
Yeah.
If Lukic and Reed are the backup 2, then who plays in front of them? Because Kenny, I don't think, sees himself in that role. And I don't think Silva does either. When Silva brings him on, it's often to change games or to switch the midfield shape a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think that you can't really back that up in the same way. I think you need 2 players in there. Okay, maybe one of them doesn't have to be a locked-on starter. Maybe it doesn't have to be a £30 million player. Maybe it's a £15 million player. But I mean, I still think we need an Andre and a Vinicius Souza, or an Andre and a Richard Rios, or
Kalvin Phillips.
A Kalvin Phillips. We'll come on to Kalvin Phillips because I feel slightly differently about it to a lot of people, and I can understand the frustrations. And then I think we need one centre back's red and one's orange, but it goes red if Tim Ream leaves for Charlotte.
Yeah.
So there's those 2 positions, and then the rest of it's okay a little bit. I think
fullback. I mean, left.
Probably fine.
We haven't got a backup left.
No, I mean, Calvin Bassey can do a job out there. I wouldn't be... And Castagna can play both sides.
Yes.
So I'd be less concerned. But Fodo Ballatore has been told he can leave Milan. Now, whether he would sign for Fulham in terms of knowing he's the backup, probably not. No. But I wouldn't be averse if that's on the table, because actually I think that he's the kind of player that if next summer, for example, a bid was to come in for Anthony Robinson, you could have a Fodo Ballatore waiting in the wings to step into that role and to kick on. And I think that's how you'd have to sell it to him.
I'd be amazed if you can convince.
So would I.
Ballatore.
But also, I don't know if there's loads of clubs he's going to go and be the starting left back straight away, because I don't think there's enough of a body of evidence to suggest that, to show what he can do.
But left back is one of the positions in world football where there aren't enough of them.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But it's a... Yeah, I would like, if that was on the table,
and then what, backup keeper orange?
Well, Stephen Bender's in there, isn't he? We just forgotten about him because he wasn't around all season. So, yes. I mean, I think that was done with a view to potentially Marek leaving this summer anyway. So I'm okay with that.
Okay. And then in terms of incomings, there have been a lot of rumours. Where do we want to start? Because right now, I try and look objectively at the transfer window. Really, I feel like you get some people who like look at every single rumor. I try and just work out, and it's an element of just guessing / you see it in enough papers, or you see the right journalists talk about it. I've not seen anything other than Andre reported, other than a bid for SMITH-ROWE, where I'm like, I'm hanging my hat. Clearly, Fulham are interested.
There's a few where I know that there has been interest, or I've heard it from people that I trust in.
All right, so who are we going for that feels like, because at the moment there's a lot of noise, who are you seeing that you're like, actually, I think there might be some weight behind it?
Well, I think we've thrown out a little bit of like random interest / sort of bids, tentative bids for players. I heard from Italy that the Samuele Ricci bid for Torino happened. I didn't hear that from an English journalist. I heard it from an Italian journalist, and he said Fulham had put an offer on the table for 20 million, and Torino batted it straight off and were like, we want 30 million. I don't think Fulham will go back in for him. I really like Ricci, but I don't think that Fulham will go back in for him at that price. Okay. I think they would just... And he's a central defensive midfielder. And someone I really like, did really well for the Italy under squads, came through at Empoli, got promoted with them, and moved then to Torino after a couple of good seasons at Serie A. good player, really good player, and someone that I like a lot. But I also don't think Fulham will pay 30 million for him. I think 20 million was like sort of we'll offer you this, and if you take it, we'll be like, bang, got one.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably fair. I can't see them returning, and I think there has been that kind of activity where Fulham just fired off a couple of just ones that they're sort of. There are some weird rumours out of Turkey. Isn't
there always a few weird rumours out of Turkey?
But I trust quite a lot of what they're talking about regarding the two 18-year-old strikers at Besiktas, right? Like, I get that. That makes sense to me. And that would mean as a strategy that Fulham are looking at someone to potentially come in next season to play backup, perhaps, or, to push themselves into the picture when Raul probably moves on.
Yeah.
So, fine. That all makes sense. The link I don't get is Jadon Osterwalder, who plays for Mourinho's Fenerbahce, who is a left back / centre back. That doesn't add up. Like, that doesn't make sense to me unless Fulham are, because the money involved in that is 25, 30 million euros. I don't understand why Fulham would spend that on a back. Like, okay, maybe Tim Ream leaves. I can't see Fulham spending that on a left-footed, left-sided. We
literally have too many left-sided defenders.
So why would we be investing that kind of money into the side where actually we have a locked-on, rock-solid starter? That doesn't add up to me. So I've kind of written that rumour off a little bit. The one that I really like, and I've heard, obviously Portugal is somewhere that is close to my heart and who I tend to have built a little bit of a network there. The Jota Silva rumours did seem to have some weight in that Fulham are interested, but I don't know if there's been any sort of contact between the clubs. Now, Jota Silva is a phenomenal footballer. He plays for Vitória Guimarães, which is the club that tends to finish sort of 5th every year in the Primeira. Okay. Big local rivalry with SC Braga, and Jota Silva has been their left winger for the last couple of years. He's a lovely footballer, like really good at taking players on one-on-one, someone who makes things happen in tight areas, someone who's willing to commit a defender and break lines. He's given this tag of the Guimarães Grealish, which doesn't necessarily add up to maybe what he does, well, what Jack Grealish does right now, but similar kind of vibe in terms of what he was going with in terms of taking on players when Grealish was at Villa.
Yeah.
I really like him.
Is it his party lifestyle that he's been?
It's not. He's not a party boy lifestyle. Okay. Sadly, but I do think that that's the kind of player that Fulham should be looking at in terms of a Willian replacement, because it's not just about the experience, etc. with Willian. It's about the fact that he's able to commit a defender one-on-one, and that's what allows the overlaps, etc. around him. And I think that someone like Jota Silva would do a good job. Now, reports out of Portugal in the last couple of days suggesting that actually Guimarães' first price for him, basically everyone was like, nah, you're all right, go away. And they've now dropped that price to around 12 to 15 million euros. Yeah. At that price point, I think we should be all over it. Yeah, I think he's a wonderful footballer. I think he was unlucky to miss out on the Portuguese squad for the Euros. That's how good he's been in the Primeira this year. And obviously fits that mould of the kind of players that we're bringing in, you know, Portuguese speakers. I, as far as I'm concerned, it's a no-brainer. We're also linked with Alexis Salamakers, who plays for AC Milan, spent last year on loan to Bologna. It wasn't as effective at Bologna as I thought he was going to be, potentially because the players around him were all very, very good.
Yeah.
But I did think it was an interesting link, someone who can play both sides of the attack. Has sort of always been that peripheral figure at AC Milan, in that he's the kind of guy that plays a lot and played a lot opposite Rafa Leao to begin with, and was kind of the make weight for Leao to just do what he wanted. But I do like him. I really like his work rate. Someone who can finish as well. A clever player. Not the most physically able, but a clever player. And I think that if Fulham are invested in a relatively sensible price there, it's another one that could work out. I think the kind of player that Marcus would really like.
So a couple of the more household name links from the last, I mean, nothing seems to have happened with Smith-Rowe, although there does seem to be that reports from Sky
today that we're going back in.
We're going back in, but okay, we kind of did Smith-Rowe last week.
I've got my concerns at that price point. I'm really worried about his injury record. I know that sometimes a player has. I just feel that he's starting to get towards that, are we going to be in a what could have been career here? And obviously, Marco Silva has done works with a lot of players who felt like that at one point, and I completely get it, and I absolutely understand that. But the price that's been talked about, £35 million, £40 million, I'd be a little bit wary of starting to do that, because at what point does it become Andreas Pereira or Emile Smith-Rowe? And I know a lot of people won't like this, but if those are the options, I'd rather stick with Pereira.
Well, for me, it might be better the devil,
Well, yeah, but also I trust Pereira's injury record. Obviously, he got injured at the end of
anyone can get
last year, and that was
an ankle.
Exactly, but he came back and was pretty much ever present. He's been rock solid in terms of
set pieces.
Yeah, he's been rock solid in terms of his energy, in terms of what he brings to the pitch every time. Yes, he's not perfect technically. He wouldn't be playing for Fulham if he was, but he does all of the things that Marco Silva wants from his 10 so well. And I really do think that if that's the risk we're taking at that kind of price, I don't know, man.
The thing about Pereira is he turned a corner at the end of last season, I think. He scored a few goals. He got that much. He was really angry, I felt like, about February, March. Even when Fulham were doing well, he wasn't doing as well. I think he was snatching at shots and getting angry with himself because he wasn't contributing to goals. And actually, towards the end of the season, I think the Brazil call-up massively just helped him, and he chilled out a little bit. And lo and behold, I think he wasn't even just yes, he got a couple of goals against West Ham. That was a great day, but it was also he was contributing all-round play was much, much better.
Yeah.
I don't see this as a position. I would rather us say, if we've got... Look, Andre feels like it's locked in-ish, and fingers crossed we get that over the line. I'm going to guess there's probably one more big transfer up our sleeves in terms of big money. I would much rather save that for left wing.
Or centre-back.
Yeah, I mean, if there was a position that I could go big on, and I feel like we could do with someone that strikes fear into a defence. I think we need that kind. Look, Harry Wilson, Adama Traore strikes fear in other ways and stuff like that. I would love to see us sign a really exciting left winger. Talking the two other players that have been linked, and there's been a lot of chat about. First of all, let's come on to Crescencio Somerville. Now, this is a player that's been banded around to everyone. Obviously, as soon as Leeds didn't go up, he was the Championship player of the season. He was always going to be linked with a Premier League move. I mean, he's a good player.
Good player, like Somerville. I think he's, sharp. The fee being touted around is pretty high.
But it was always going to be.
But it was always going to be, as you say, Championship Player of the Year. We know that Championship Players of the Year haven't always translated to the Premier League. Given that one of our own didn't really make that jump in the same kind of way. I wouldn't be averse to Fulham signing Crescencio Somerville, but equally, if you're saying this, would I rather Somerville or Jota Silva? I'd rather sign Jota Silva. I think that there's
Somerville's a known quantity, though, isn't he? He's been in the division
a known Championship
before.
quantity, and look, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
But he also loosely proved it in the Premier League.
I think, in
a bad team.
Yeah, in the same way Fabio perhaps did.
Yeah, no, but he had a full Premier League season.
I just think that there's kind of a sense of being I like him, and I think he's a good player. I think he's probably a £20 million player that's always obviously got a reasonable kind of tax on him in terms of he's homegrown for Leeds, they're looking for money, etc. I get all of that, 100%. I just wonder if you can get better value in the market. And look, I actually really like the Championship pathway, right? I think that if you're signing the best players in the Championship, you're off and on to something. And, we can talk about Ipswich are doing this quite well at the moment. They signed Jacob Greaves, and they obviously picked up Amari Hutchinson from last year. They've brought Liam Delap in, who's a little bit of an unknown quantity, but I kind of like. I get what they're trying to do. And we've talked about it before, because if you get relegated, Luton did it a bit last year. If you get relegated, you have a squad of players who know how to win in the Championship and effectively can win the league, come straight back up.
Yeah. Fulham have never really gone down that road.
It's never really been something we've dug down.
Because you even look at the likes of Jared Bowen. Yeah. It was so obvious. I never forget
Watkins, when right?
Yeah.
There's loads of examples of it working. Equally, there are some examples of it not working.
Yes.
But I just wonder with Somerville how much of it was that the entire attack was geared around him last year for Leeds. He was the guy that when Leeds were in trouble, They went to Somerville. If Fulham are in trouble, are we going to go to Crescencio or Somerville? I don't think so. Even if we sign him. I think that Fulham will look for Rodrigo Muniz. I think they'll look for Andreas Pereira. They'll look to the players that have been there for a while and prove that they can create things when it comes to the clutch. That's not to say don't sign him. I'm just wary of that price point. In the same way that I'm a little bit, well, not the same way, but in the same way I'm wary of Smith-Rowe's price point, does that hang heavy on them as soon as they make that transfer? Because at that point, for that money, you're kind of expected to be a star.
Yeah, he from what I've seen of Somerville, he does carry himself though as the kind of player.
Yeah, he's got a bit of a swagger about it.
He'd kind of thrive on it.
Yeah.
I feel like, and a man with a Leeds connection as well. Kalvin Phillips continues to kind of be mentioned in Fulham circles. I've kind of assumed he's just going to go to Everton. It feels like a natural fit, but I guess
I don't know if they can do that deal financially. That's my question about it. I think if
on loan, no.
I still don't think they can do that deal financially. That's where I'm at with it.
Do Fulham need to go down this road?
No.
I know Marco Silva can work wonders.
I mean, this is also a player. It's quite easy to forget now. We've seen Kalvin Phillips in the last year. That 3 years ago, Kalvin Phillips was the bench, the rock of the England midfield. The person that everybody was built around in that team. The reason a lot of that worked in midfield was Kalvin Phillips, right? And look, I know a lot of fun was made of Gareth Southgate speaking about, he's like, we don't have a Kalvin Phillips figure anymore this summer. But I think that matters to him because that's the way he builds relationships and builds partnerships. There's something there for Kalvin Phillips. He hasn't just become a bad player overnight. Now, I think there are problems. And to be honest, if I was him, and I spoke about this on Ranks this week, if I was him, I would get the hell out of the Premier League, get out of the glare, go somewhere
that's
mad.
What he wanted to do. And then Southgate said he'd be less likely to be selected if he didn't go to West Ham.
Honestly, that worked out well. If I was him, I'd be looking at like a Girona, Sporting, like teams that have midfield holes, vacancies that he could fill, where he is not going to be stared at week in, week out.
He's not going to get
by the mirror.
He's not going to get back in the England team playing for Sporting.
I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily think he needs to go there permanently. A year on loan, rediscover yourself, and then I'm not saying that he's going to walk into the City team because I don't think he's got a future there.
No.
But if you have a good year in the Primera, playing in the heart of Ruben Amorim's midfield.
Yeah, but even Tomori can't get in the England squad. He's been forgotten about.
No, but if you have one good year there and you come back and then, I don't know, not a West Ham obviously, but a West Ham-esque club actually I've seen what he's done there. Actually, there's still a player there and he's refound that confidence and rediscovered it. But look, in terms of Fulham, do I think Marco Silva could turn it around? Yeah, I do. Do I think it's going to be worth it as a permanent deal? Not really. And therefore, what's the cost on that? And therefore, what's a loan with an option cost, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's a difficult deal to get done. But I don't mind it in terms of personnel, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. You'd think that someone like, Pep and Man City in general would probably see Fulham as a good fit. Like, if you want the kind of Premier League equivalent of going to the Primera, it's Fulham. If you want...
Or Wolves.
Yeah, or Brentford probably.
I thought you meant just Portuguese speakers.
Oh right, sorry, no. I more meant like in terms of a Premier League club that's, it's in the spotlight because it's in the Premier League, but like West Ham was always quite high tariff.
It is, but to be honest, as soon as something like, as in people will follow to have a look at Kalvin Phillips to Fulham, right? Like if people are watching, they'll be like, oh my God, there's Kalvin Phillips. They'll write an entire article on it. No one is going to go and watch Sporting to find out how Kalvin Phillips is doing. That's the kind of idea I have. Anyway, this is completely by the by. But it does matter, I think. If Fulham could get that done on a reasonable price point or a reasonable loan that has a good option on it, I'd take it. I don't think it should be where we're looking first and foremost.
Yeah. All right, we'll take a quick break there. Afterwards, we've got some more Fulham news and your emails. Part 2 of the Fulhamish podcast. It's Sammy here with Jack Collins. Jack, let's talk Jay Stansfield.
Yeah.
Because the noise about him leaving seems to be hotting up. I cannot buy any of it. I cannot believe that Fulham are even entertaining it. Birmingham, I've heard this week, want to table a £6 million offer. Now, Birmingham are splashing the cash in League One, a bit like financial fair play literally doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, have they not made the 3 most expensive signings in League One history in this transfer window?
Yeah.
Great stuff.
But it's not, I mean, and there's also rumours of him going to Cardiff. I think that's probably more likely to be a loan rather than a permanent.
Yeah.
We're just not. Surely we're not. We cannot have done this for however many years. Jay Stansfield, he's done the whole pathway. We're not surely at the last second going to go, oh yeah, you know what, we'll take 6 million and cut our losses. Unless Marco has seen something that we all haven't and thinks that he just... this doesn't feel like even remotely feasible to me.
Right, so I'm going to set this out importantly to begin with. I don't think we should sell Jay Stansfield for that amount of money right now, full stop. I also am a bit wary that Jay Stansfield being away from Fulham has turned him into a superstar in certain people's heads. It's a bit like Ivan Toney's price point was the highest when he wasn't playing football, right?
Yeah.
Because the idea of what he could be... Jay Stansfield scored 11 goals in the Championship last year, right? For a poor Birmingham side. Fine.
Yeah.
Decent return. Sammy Szmodics, who is an attacking midfielder in an almost equally as bad Blackburn Rovers side, scored nearly 3 times the amount of goals. Does that not give anyone else any sort of sense of an attacking midfielder? Yes, all right, everything went through Szmodics. Good player, really good player. But if Fulham were bidding more than £10 million for Sammy Szmodics, I'd be like, what?
Yeah, but Szmodics has been in the Championship for a long time and he finally has bloomed into something.
But equally, I don't think that Jay's goal-scoring record at Exeter wasn't great. His goal-scoring record at Birmingham was all right.
But who knows how these players can turn up?
What
was Rodrigo Muniz' scoring record before he started banging them in?
Absolutely dreadful. Agreed. And I'm not saying... And look, there's loads about Jay's game that I really like, right? I think he's a brilliant ball striker. I think that the way he drifts and the way he's played in that Birmingham team and the way he's linked play up at times, really impressive. He also has played in a 2 up front for most of the time he's been away from Fulham. Apart from that, he's played on the wing at times. And look, whether Fulham can work that into the setting, I always said that I thought he should be the backup left year. That would have been where I would have had him in terms of squad depth. Yeah. But equally, I do think there's a kind of sense. And look, I'm not saying sell him because I don't think that's a high enough price point. But if someone put 12 million on the table, I'd take it.
Why though? Because like the potential upside of someone like Stansfield, okay, let's say the whole thing doesn't work. Jay Stansfield, he gets a few Premier League minutes and actually he's not really up to standard. He's Championship level at best. In a few years you'd get 5 for him, whatever, because he's a young English player that clearly can score goals. Like someone will stump up 5-6 million for him in 2 or 3 years if the whole experiment's failed.
Pure profit though, isn't it?
But if the experiment works and suddenly he becomes into a Premier League quality left winger, he's on the verge of the England squad, and then suddenly he's worth 50 million. You selling him for 12 million now? Why? Why would you? What's the point? Give him a go. And I think yes.
Surely that comes down to Marco Silva, right?
All players, go away and they look better. And, if I had £1 for every email that we've ever received saying this youngster could be the problem, the answer to our problems, I think we'd all be doing all right. That's always happened. But at the same time, the glimpses that we saw him in a Premier League shirt, that first start he got against Brentford where he was really impressive.
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, George Wickens went to Ross County, was brilliant, right?
Yeah, but that's Ross County.
And now, well, I mean, he was brilliant in games against Rangers.
Yeah,
that was the game where everyone was like, "Who the hell is this goalkeeper?" Right? So that is something.
But Ashby Hammond had the game of his life against Bournemouth. That can happen.
Things can happen like this, where you kind of looking at players in isolation, and I think it's dangerous. Look, I think what I'm saying, and I've said this for a long time, every time our academy produces a player that ends up playing in the pyramid is a success for the academy, and I think that we tend to have this hyperinflated opinion that players are only successful if they make it to the first team. I actually don't think that's true at all. No. Part of this is about development. And look, to use an example at a much higher level, right? Real Madrid's academy is called La Fabrica, and they basically bring no one through. The last player to come straight through from the Real Madrid academy was Nacho. and he's just left, like having been club captain and basically gone off to Saudi Arabia to retire. Players leave and they come back. What I would like to see, if Fulham were to sell someone like Stansfield, is you go, bang, we'll have first option and a fee to bring him back.
Well, that's what Villa have done with...
That's what Villa have done very, very well with their recent signings, right? So starting to understand that kind of model. But look, that's what Real Madrid would do with so many people. Vasquez, Carvajal, everyone they sell. Fran Garcia, last year, back from Rayo Vallecano. Everyone they sell has a... Hosselu, yeah, well, not quite. But you know what I mean? Everyone has that kind of, okay, go off and prove to us you can make it and come back. And I think that that's a relatively sensible strategy in some ways, because not only are you being like, well, I'm banking on, their current ability, I'm also future-proofing against their potential. So at that point, you kind of doubled down on all of the things. And I think that that's probably the most sensible way to go about stuff if Fulham are looking to offload academy products at this point, which is what the strategy seems to be. Now, my first choice scenario would be that Jay sticks around, we buy a first choice left winger, and he becomes that game-changing potential left winger, maybe can do a job through the middle if things aren't working, potentially can play up top in a 2. I've said this before, that kind of versatile forward is something that Fulham really lack. Yeah. Someone who could hold their space as a number 9 if they're on their own, who we don't have to bring on 2 players who do exactly the same thing as we did with Mitro and Muniz for a while. I think Raul and Muniz are not the same player, but they often try to occupy the same areas of the pitch at some points. They don't really work together as a 2 when you're trying to chase a game. Jay is actually a bit different, and I would love to see him in that kind of role this season. But if an offer came in that was 8 figures, I think we'd have to consider it.
Yeah, I find it a bit mad that we're considering it. I guess
I wouldn't consider 6 million for what it's worth. I would turn that down flat.
Yeah,
but if a 10 million, 12 million offer came in, I think you'd have to have a think about it.
Yeah. One interesting video that I didn't expect to see was this Shahid Khan interview, which was done by Bloomberg Originals, as in Bloomberg, the finance. What is it, a news channel? But I think they're
a financial news channel, I believe.
Yeah, they're much bigger than that. They're a huge organisation. And they did this interview. It was an American interviewer, and it was about Shahid Khan and his vision of trying to marry up the NFL and the Premier League. And it made some interesting points, how the Premier League has really won the kind of global audience battle, but in terms of making money, no one comes close to the NFL, and the NFL I think makes maybe 5-6 times more revenue than the Premier League. I think the NFL's 20 billion and I think the Premier League is 6, which is
big gap.
Huge gap, but the Premier League has a much bigger worldwide audience than the NFL. But anyway, this video was about how Shahid Khan owns the Jags and how Shahid Khan owns Fulham, and kind of how he's trying to learn from each other. I must admit, it was a huge fluff piece.
Yeah, it was quite blustery, wasn't it?
Very. I also was like, it probably wasn't made for us.
Yeah, we are not the target audience.
There was a real lack of tough questioning there.
It was made for a business audience. Like, I think first and foremost, who might have a business audience with a passing interest in sport, as opposed to a sporting audience with a passing interest in business.
Yes. I thought that there was a couple of things for me that stood out from this video, and there was one very throwaway line if you kind of weren't watching it closely. But Shahid Khan is talking about how basically the whole 365, making money off sporting facilities all year round is more, because there's relegation and promotion in the Premier League. You can't always count on that to make you money, so you're going to have to build the facilities around it.
Which is a fair point.
We never disagreed. There was one thing that was really clear though, and it was a little bit like, ooh, that's interesting. He just said, Fulham has the richest and most educated fan base in the country. Real throwaway line, but there was a shade of what's the right word?
Entitlement about it.
Yeah, just a bit like throwaway line. So therefore, we can make lots of money.
Also, I have
this.
no idea how they measure that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, there's all sorts of surveys and polls for everything. I get sent press releases to the Fulhamish inbox all the time of Fulham has the poshest fan base or Fulham has the best linguistic fan base and all things. So people do these kind of polls and surveys.
Craven Cottage is the favourite away day of the country.
Oh yeah, I get that.
That one comes a lot.
As well. I don't know. That maybe it's me being a bit cynical, but it all felt a little bit like, oh wow, like all of the things that we talked about over the years of Fulham hoiking up the ticket prices and becoming a real like commercial entity. I think this was a bit of a peel behind the curtain of some of that decision making. That's what I felt.
I also think that, you know, whilst you can generalize about certain things like that, you're not necessarily looking at the parts of the fan base that are doing certain things.
Yeah.
You know, that might be true of the wider Fulham fan base, right? And it might be true of the people who are like, you know, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of these things, but if you're like, okay, are you counting a Fulham fan as someone who goes every week, who has a passing interest, who follows the club on Twitter, who, you know, how are you determining what makes a fan to begin with for that one?
I'm going to guess, like all of these things, some company surveyed 100 fans outside of each stadium.
Yeah.
And asked them what they earn.
Or did an online survey, right? Like, I get all that. But like, also you're kind of missing the point there, which is that, you know, all of this is so changeable within a fan base. Look, if Fulham have the ability to attract more people to go to the Riverside stand, etc., then fine. Like that, you know, that is fine. At the cost of other fans, though, who might not be able to do that, you and I, for example, who very much couldn't afford that. That makes don't speak for yourself, me there. That's so mean. But
no, I can't. I was just joking.
You know, like when we're talking about those things, like how does that affect the fans that are, you know, there week in, week out? Are you interested in terms of, you know, what's the demographic or different demographic of the away fan base to the home fan base? Like all of these things matter. And I just think that in terms of to generalize like that, whilst that might be done from some survey on whatever it is, to generalize like that and put the fan base into a bracket like that, I think is probably
it was very sweeping, wasn't it?
The source of all of the issues in terms of the clashes that are continuing to occur between fan base and the club itself.
Yeah, I think I just watched this video and yeah, we've been wondering what those discussions are at board level, why Fulham have been taking certain decisions. And if we've just been going with this metric that we've got the richest fan base, if that is actually something that's being said internally, oh, we've got the richest fan base. Like, what does that mean? Like, okay, our average is slightly higher than what? Tottenham's?
Yeah.
Like,
but also like, you know, what we discussing in terms of like, are you going to use that in variation against different parts of the country having different living costs against, you know, what the kind of salaries are? Like all of this matters in terms of how people are. And I think, you know, given what's happened over the last few years, people have less money to spend on their activities, right? There is a cost of living crisis that continues to not abate to this day. And we are in it. And so therefore you're kind of looking at all of this thing and be like, oh, well, there's the most money there. You're like, well, that doesn't really take the full picture into account.
Yeah.
Because, and never will, because unfortunately Fulham, but football in general means something different to every fan. And therefore to not utilise it in that, to use these kind of sweeping generalisations, I think is probably the root cause of so many of the issues that we've seen over the last couple of years.
I think that's what, you know, Fulham, and, you know, you can listen to this podcast and listen to our accents and all of that and take the piss. But, like, it's one thing that, like, it's the only little bit of the whole, like, Fulham have a posh fan base that slightly annoys me. I don't really care if they want to, you know, the Victoria Sponge thing, that's all just fun and games.
When we're sponsored
and
by Fortnum and Mason. Like,
yeah, that's all just a bit of a laugh and stuff like that. But I'm also like, I meet so many Fulham fans and I meet so many Fulham fans who are not.
Well, from all walks of life.
Yeah.
Like,
well off.
Yeah, 100%.
Or well to do.
It's just one of those things.
And don't live next to the crabtree.
Yeah.
Like,
or, you know, or grew up in the parts of Fulham that are not, you know, the places that we imagine, that are imagined to be by the rest of the, I think, you know, the rest of the country comes down, they walk from Putney Bridge, they walk through that part, they see the big houses on Stevenage Road, they're like, oh, this is where the Fulham fans live. But like,
Yeah.
you only need to go 10 minutes down the road to World's End Estate. You only need, and look, I'm not suggesting that any of these places are bad or good places to live. That's not what I'm getting at here. But I'm suggesting that there are, and London always has been. There's a really good piece about this week. London always has been different areas crammed up against each other that are of different socioeconomic backgrounds, that put different communities next to each other. That's part of the beauty of this city, and part of the beauty of what makes it special, in that you can live, you know, between two places and have two completely different, like almost livelihoods at the end of your street. And, you know, and that's what makes London quite amazing in so many different ways. But to generalize in terms of what Fulham is, or, you know, that everybody lives in the big houses by the river, is just like, I mean, it's a lower level of stupid.
Yeah. Exactly. 2 emails before we finish. This one from Sam Purcell. Hello, hi. In lieu of anything else to talk about, I had a thought about something I often wondered. The state of the Hammersmith End toilets is mentioned by fans all of the time.
Rancid.
Can you give a more detailed description about their state and what makes them so bad? As someone who has always been in the Johnny Haynes stand, I've often wondered. The men's urinal wall at the Johnny Haynes stand is fine. Good water flow and drainage. It does its job pretty well. Thanks so much, from Sam.
I mean, they're just majorly overcrowded is probably the first point of call. And obviously there isn't enough space to make them any bigger. So they're just really, really tight in terms of what they are. I just think that the entire thing is just like, it feels like it was made 70 years ago and it's just never been changed. And that's okay when it's the facade on the Stevenage Road, because you're walking through it. But in terms of the drain, you know, what that actually looks like as a utility, if we will, I think that it's one of those things that just feels outdated. And it feels like, I mean, we spoke about the Hammersmith End before they put in the new stairs, and look, credit to the club where it's due.
The stairs have helped.
The stairs have helped. It nowhere near feels as crushed as it used to at the top of the Hammersmith End. It's still not great, but it's much better than it was.
You actually now, in the duration of half time, can go to the toilet, which is a genuine improvement, because beforehand, when it was the one set of stairs,
yeah, you couldn't.
I actually used to time it for the end of half time.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I actually won't get out if I will. I might. It will take me just as long if I go now.
100%.
There's generally it's generally like a little bit
quite grim.
Yeah, it's generally like a tad flooded as well. The floor, like it's kind of. It's not like you're not wading through piss. Like, let's not get it like exaggerated there. It's just a little bit grim. It's a bit tight. Most toilets you want to get out as fast as you go in, but at the same time, those ones definitely are a. Yeah, and anything else other than urinal, I've never even tried.
No, it doesn't feel worth it. I think there's like one cubicle.
There is like one cubicle.
It just all feels very mucky, is probably how I put it. It's outdated, and that's maybe where you draw the line.
Yeah. I never thought we'd have to discuss that on the podcast.
No, I never really thought about it. I just know that I don't like them, but I've never actually considered why.
They are kind of used as the line, though. Whenever it's like, oh, we pay high ticket prices, 99% of the times you can look at someone in the comments on X and it'll be like, oh yeah, and they've still not fixed the toilets.
It just does feel like they're kind of ignoring it on purpose. I think that's generally the issue with this.
There's a lot of building work going on. You never know. We might come back and it might be like Fulham and Mason might have gone in and done the toilets.
Exactly. I haven't got any Aesop hand soap.
Yeah, we can dream. I want some Bayliss and Harding when I go to wash my hands. Final question from Tom Elam. Hi gang, have missed you and Fulham over the summer. Well, we're back. Fulham not quite yet. There's another friendly, by the way. We're playing Severe as well. Oh
yeah, they've added that. That's another shambles. What on earth are they doing? So they've set out a friendly timetable where we're like, cool, we're flying to the Algarve to play a friendly. Didn't tell anyone it was going to be another friendly, so everyone's booked their flights back and forth, and now they're like, oh, by the way, there's another friendly. Like, what are they doing? Why didn't they just put like a placeholder in and be like, one more friendly to come on the Monday to be confirmed? Like, and everyone would have just stayed. Yeah. Like, it's just like the lack of regard for like what fans are doing.
I haven't been as well, but I have not heard great things about the Estadio Algarve.
No, I mean, it's not great. It's not.
The only good thing about it is it being in the Algarve.
Yeah, I mean, cool. I don't really like the Algarve, but it is what it is. Like, there's a level of it that you're just like, why haven't you thought about it? Like, at what point did you just not consider fans? Like, At what point did you go, oh, we'll play one friendly, we'll let the fans know, and then think, you know, it'd be really funny. It's like Ant and Decker in their ears, you know, doing the like, now tell them there's another friendly. like honestly, the whole thing's like, it's like they're taking the piss on purpose to wind people up. It just doesn't make sense. Like, I don't get it. I don't understand why you wouldn't just be like, by the way, 4 days later, we're playing another friendly. If you want to stick around for that at the same stadium, then great, fantastic. And instead, everyone's now like, well, hang on, what? I put my flight back that day. Like, what? It's just so frustrating in terms of the lack of communication and the lack of any sort of regard for the fan base as a whole. I mean, look, I'm banging the same old drum, but like, yeah, it's just another one of like, if on its own as a one-off, shrug, but it's just another one to add to the pile, and eventually the straw is going to break the camel's back.
Yeah. This question from Tom, he says, what would you guys think about the club making a move for Lukaku? He always seems to do better for quote-unquote smaller clubs, Everton, West Brom, and Marco Silva has a skill for getting the best out of players who haven't been performing. He would also fit that we've been playing with the Mitro-esque figure up top, from Tom. Obviously, this slightly goes against what we've been discussing already, that we don't think that a striker is on Fulham's shopping list. I also just watched Lukaku now and think he's cursed.
Yeah, there is an element of that. I mean, look, he was fine for Roma last year. He wasn't great, didn't set the world on fire, but he was... Loves scoring the Europa League. He was grand, like, and did a good job in there while Tammy Abraham was injured. And I think that's all that they could have asked from him. I mean, and what do we think about this? As an idea, I don't mind it. I mean, he is going to Napoli. Like, it's pretty much done and dusted. Osimhen will leave. Conte loves Lukaku. Lukaku loves Conte. They're going to have a great time together. I'm delighted for him, and I hope he has a nice time. Basically, what I was told by Dean from the very outset this summer was that there were 3 locations that Lukaku's interested in: Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Italy. And Italy was very much the number one priority, but there was no desire for him to stay in the Premier League. As an idea, I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. Were Fulham going to sign a player to be the number one guy ahead of Muniz? If you bring Lukaku in, he starts. Done. Finished. Over. Like, there's no discussion about it. So,
and you don't give Rodrigo Muniz the 9.
Yeah, or you make Lukaku wear 99 again. I don't know.
Oh,
but like, kind of irrelevant of all that. If Lukaku came in, started badly, ex-Chelsea, with the reputation that he has, and as you say, that kind of feeling of cursedness upon him at times, if he starts badly, the calls for Muniz to play would have been deafening. And at that point, you're like, well, we just bought Lukaku to stick him on the bench. And that makes no sense to me. So as a concept, I'm pretty on board. But in reality, I just don't think it would have worked in any sort of way.
All right. Well, that'll do for the Thursday Club today. Next week, we've got a very exciting moment because we have this signed Fulham shirt. And we're going to draw the winner on the podcast. Live on the podcast.
Cool.
Which is exciting. So
is it going to be like that referee in Ireland who took tickets out for the All-Ireland final, and then you could see in the video that he had his own name in his hand? Like, oh no, Jack Collins has won the shirt. Congratulations to me.
Oh dear, Sammy James gets to put it on his own wall. Well, you know, if you've entered,
I have entered, but I will politely remove myself from said conversation.
Fine. Well, we're doing that on next week's show, and fingers crossed we have a signing to discuss.
Yes, maybe. Who knows? Or like a Marco Silva rant about how he hasn't been given any.
Well, I feel like actually one way or another we'll have something to talk about. It was the 25th of July, by the way, last year that Fulham made a signing.
That's tomorrow.
Well, it's today as the pod's being recorded. So unless something happens in the kind of 12 hours between recording now and it going out, which I highly doubt.
Signed Romelu Lukaku.
Well, that would be a turn up of the books if that happens by the time this podcast gets released. So yeah, we've got that to look forward to on next week's podcast. And hopefully, that would be nice, wouldn't it, if someone new's in a Fulham shirt. But anyway, Jack, thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much for listening. We will be back next week. Come on, you whites.
You whites.